This has never happened before. Russia has been attacked by drones for 3 days in a row. An important military factory has been destroyed. Putin is planning to expand the front along the entire border and is preparing an offensive on Chernihiv, Sumy, and Kharkiv. Sensational news. Hungary is being stripped of its voting rights in the European Union. In Russia, top officials have started talking about restoring the Soviet Union within the borders of Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. The Kremlin has begun preparing its population for an attack on Europe. Russia is once again demanding that presidential elections be held in Ukraine before signing a peace agreement. Hello, my name is Karina Kleschun, and I will tell you what's happening with Ukraine today. Hundreds of drones in the sky and military equipment under the Kremlin. In short, just another ordinary day in Russia. For 3 days in a row, Russia has been under drone attacks. 15 regions of Russia and occupied Crimea are under attack. Hundreds of flights have been delayed. The regions under attack are experiencing problems with mobile internet. The Russian authorities say that more than 600 drones were launched at Russia, most of which, of course, were shot down by Russian air defense. But as they say, there's a catch.
Oh, wow.
A drone, which is also known as an unmanned aerial vehicle, crashed directly into the facility called Energia.
These are the footage of a UAV striking the Energia plant in Yelets-Lipetsk region. This is no ordinary plant because they manufacture batteries for Russian drones there. The plant's products are also used in the production of Kinzhal and Iskander missiles. And this is the largest enterprise in Russia for the production of chemical power sources.
They're turning off the lights.
The drones also managed to successfully reach the military airfield in Ivanovo. This is already the second large-scale drone attack on Russia in recent times. Let me remind you, before the victory parade, more than 1,000 drones simultaneously attacked military targets in Russia. Putin made a statement that once again proves Russia does not want peace. Yesterday, Putin issued a new address and, for the 8th time since the start of the full-scale invasion, declared the need to create a buffer zone on the border with Ukraine.
A decision was made to create the necessary security buffer zone along the border. Our armed forces are currently working on this task. Actively.
Enemy fighting positions are being suppressed. The work is underway.
According to the publication RBC Ukraine, Russia plans to create a buffer zone 15 to 20 kilometers deep. However, as experts in Ukraine claim, these fantasies about buffer zones are far from reality.
This isn't the first time Putin has talked about a buffer zone. A year ago, things didn't work out for him with this either, even though he tried to intimidate then as well. Now he's simply showing that he doesn't want to cease fire.
But let's return to the territory where Putin dreams of creating a buffer zone. According to the dictator, he's referring to the Kursk, Bryansk, and Belgorod regions, which border Ukraine's Sumy, Kharkiv, and Chernihiv regions. Putin's official goal is to protect his peaceful population. But in reality, this is a clear signal of the kind of peace Putin wants. Spoiler, none at all.
I remind the world that Putin's statements about a buffer zone were made against the backdrop of active efforts to achieve a complete and lasting ceasefire, to stop the killings, and to advance peace. These new aggressive statements clearly reject peace efforts and show that Putin was and remains the sole reason for the continuation of the killings.
Because, as written by the American Institute for the Study of War, the statement about a buffer zone only indicates that Putin's territorial interests extend far beyond the territories that Russia has occupied. And their target is Sumy.
Sumy is located about 25 kilometers from the international border. A Russian buffer zone that would involve the capture of Sumy would prevent Ukrainian forces from striking Russian territory with artillery and tactical drones.
However, there is no need to panic yet because, as military analyst Alexander Kovalenko says, Russia still does not have enough forces.
The 70,000 troops that the Russian official forces have currently concentrated in the Kursk region are not enough to carry out a large-scale general offensive operation aimed at capturing the Sumy region or even the regional center of Sumy itself. these will mostly be actions in the border zone. These actions will not go deeper than 5 to 10, at most 10 kilometers. So to talk about any serious threat to the Sumy region or the city of Sumy, no, there isn't one.
But there are a few more reasons why Putin has started talking about a buffer zone again. It's both a demonstrative action for Russians and even a way to conceal the occupation.
To conceal the occupation. The Kremlin presents this as protection, but in reality, it just wants to seize another piece of Ukrainian territory. People in Belgorod and other border cities are frightened by the shelling. Putin wants to show that he is protecting them. If the front line is pushed deeper into Ukraine, it will be harder for the armed forces of Ukraine to reach military targets in the Russian Federation.
And most importantly, why is this dangerous for Ukraine, aside from the risk of Russia advancing?
The creation of such zones is war under a cover. Today it's a buffer zone, tomorrow a republic, the day after tomorrow, annexation. This has already happened in Crimea, Luhansk and Donetsk. Russia is once again trying to seize part of Ukraine, but presents it as protection. Ukraine and the world must call this exactly what it is, a new round of aggression.
But again, this is the 8th time Putin has talked about a buffer zone. In reality, it's the Ukrainian armed forces who are creating a buffer zone in the Kursk region. So support our defenders with a like. They are the only ones standing between us and the Russian onslaught. Meanwhile, fighting continues on the front line. In the past 24 hours, there have been over 100 combat clashes. Donbass remains the hottest spot at the moment. The occupiers are trying to fully capture Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Some combat clashes are still ongoing in the Pokrovsk direction. According to the General Staff, the Russians are also trying to break through in the Kharkiv region.
In the Kharkiv direction, the enemy tried 6 times to break through the defensive lines of our defenders near the settlement of Vovchansk and towards Dovhenka. At the same time, the enemy carried out an airstrike on the area of the settlement of Rublen.
Similarly, the occupiers are trying to establish control in the Sumy region. However, the armed forces of Ukraine are actively eliminating the enemy. Across the entire front, 1,050 occupiers were eliminated in a single day. 43 Russian artillery systems, 148 enemy drones, and other equipment were also destroyed. Russia does not want peace and continues its bloody seizure of territories. As Ukrainian MP Oleksiy Honcharenko reports, Russia is preparing a new offensive closer to autumn. And that is why negotiations are not possible before November. During this period, the Russians want to create that very buffer zone. Moreover, Moscow wants to conduct military exercises in Belarus. And this could be yet another cover for an offensive, just as it was in 2022. Leave a like to support the Ukrainian defenders and write a few kind words in the comments. I know they are watching us.
Thank you.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
That day has come, well, almost. Hungary may be stripped of its voting rights. On May 27th, the EU Council will convene to decide Hungary's fate in the Union, or more precisely, its rights. This will be the 8th meeting regarding Hungary. Like the previous 7, this meeting is being convened by European officials due to the risk that Budapest is violating the values on which the EU is founded.
The discussions have concerned the functioning of the constitutional system, the system of checks and balances, the fight against corruption, the protection of civil society, academic freedom and freedom of the media, as well as the protection of LGBT rights in Hungary.
And the problems with Hungary are not limited to just the Ukrainian issue. In addition to playing along with the Kremlin, Prime Minister Viktor Orban has also led his country to violations of democratic values and even freedom of speech within his own country. Because of this, in fact, Hungarians have protested more than once.
It's over, friends, or perhaps better, it's the end for the comrade.
In short, there are no fewer internal problems because by interacting with Putin, Orban has adopted too many Kremlin methods. And it has reached the point where his country has already been left without EU funding. And just so you understand, Brussels noticed Orban's government's deviation from democratic principles as early as 2018. And that's when they actually started the investigation. In recent days, there has been increasing talk in Russia that the USSR still exists, legally speaking. They've started pushing propaganda, telling stories about how good things were back then, and that everything can still be brought back. While we were laughing at the strange statements made by Russian politicians, a new goal for the Russians in this war has emerged. As stated by Sobolev, a member of the Defense Committee of the State Duma of the Russian Federation, the Kremlin wants to create a single union state of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine.
Well, as I have said many times before, and I want to emphasize once again, undoubtedly, the complete and comprehensive solution to these important goals of the special military operation is the creation of a single unified union state of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, as well as the restoration of the Russian world within its natural historical borders. We are all Russians. Kiev is the mother of Russian cities. Prince Vladimir is Russian, Yuri Dolgoruki is Russian, Yaroslav the Wise is Russian, and so on and so forth.
That is why we must, without question, defend our Russian world.
The Russian maw is so vast, and that is precisely why Europe needs to hear these words. After all, the Soviet Union, so desired by Russians, also included countries that are now part of the EU. Ukraine has already responded to this statement. As emphasized by the Center for Countering Disinformation, Putin voiced this narrative as early as 2001 during a meeting with Lukashenko and Kuchma.
Ukraine immediately refused to support even the very idea. And then things continued. From 2010 to 2014, Russia made aggressive attempts to implement this idea through politics, sports, marketing, and culture. Fortunately, it didn't work out because we didn't allow it. So the words of the Russian Sobolev, which everyone is talking about now, are not new at all. All this nonsense has been in Putin's head for a very long time.
If such nonsense has been in Putin's head for so long, then we should expect new statements and actions from the Kremlin, because it seems like a real task for Putin's military and diplomats. What do you think? Is the restoration of the Soviet Union possible? Write your thoughts in the comments. And the talks about a union state are being packaged into the Kremlin's next statements. As Lavrov stated, Russia wants elections to be held in Ukraine before a peace agreement is signed. Earlier, they seem to have already dismissed the issue of Zelensky's legitimacy when the White House condemned Putin's statement about establishing temporary external governance in Ukraine. However, today, Lavrov has once again returned to the question of Zelensky's legitimacy. He wants it and says that there will be a second round of negotiations.
It's a different matter when it comes to signing. At that point, the question of legitimacy will be crucial. Because if those whose legitimacy, to put it mildly, no longer convinces anyone are the ones who sign, then their successors might call the agreement into question.
The question of the legitimacy of the Ukrainian president concerns only Russia because it's just another plan to delay negotiations and buy time. And the Kremlin's attempts to hold elections in Ukraine once again prove that Russia wants to influence them in such a way as to install a leader who will be loyal to the Kremlin and then go on to promote narratives about a union state. In addition, Lavrov rejected the proposal to make the Vatican a negotiation platform between Ukraine and Russia.
It's not very realistic because, well, just imagine the Vatican actually being chosen as a venue for important international negotiations. It's a bit inelegant, I would say. Think about it. Orthodox countries, with their own distinct religious traditions and histories, would be meeting and discussing matters on a platform that is fundamentally Catholic. This situation could easily be seen as awkward or even inappropriate, given the deep-rooted differences between these branches of Christianity.
And now some statistics that are not encouraging. Every fourth child wants to leave Ukraine for another country. This is indicated by a survey on the website of the Olena Zelenska Foundation. At the same time, most parents would like their children to stay in Ukraine. The main reasons for migration among children are more opportunities abroad, the chance to see the world and education. Interestingly, the safety factor has the least influence on this. However, in Europe, it is believed that the number of Ukrainians there will decrease significantly as early as this year. Overall, the number of people with temporary protection in the EU will drop from 4.3 million in 2025 to 3.8 million in 2026. But so far, Europeans' hopes are not coming true, because in just the last 5 months, another 100,000 people have left Ukraine. Meanwhile, in Poland, presidential candidate Karol Nawrocki has promised not to let Ukraine join NATO and has begun promoting anti-Ukrainian policies.
Of course, today the discussion about Ukraine joining NATO is absolutely inappropriate. Ukraine's accession to NATO would mean that the entire North Atlantic Alliance would be at war with the Russian Federation.
Nawrocki also emphasized that he would not allow Polish soldiers to be sent to Ukrainian territory. However, the current Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, responded to such a sharp statement. He called the candidate's promise not to let Ukraine into NATO an act of treason.
A candidate for president of Poland who, in order to please Mr. Menson, says during one of the broadcasts that Poland will never agree to Ukraine joining NATO, there is no better term for this than treason.
And he emphasized, the last thing Poland should do is implement or support Putin's demands. Tusk stressed that Ukraine's membership in NATO is fundamental from the perspective of Poland's security. And what do you think about this? Write your thoughts in the comments. It's no coincidence that lately European leaders have started talking about the defense of Europe. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Putin is preparing Russians for an attack on the West and is shaping a state ideology of ultranationalism in Russia.
Putin will likely expand efforts to unite Russian society against an imagined threat from the West and to develop an elite class of militarized nationalists in order to ensure that any successor will embody similarly aggressive and dangerous ideals that perpetuate an eternal conflict with the West and NATO.
Before attacking Ukraine, the Kremlin's narrative was identical. Ukraine was supposedly threatening Russia. Now they are claiming that soon Europe will attack Russia. Do you believe that Putin could attack Europe and NATO? Share your thoughts in the comments. That's all for now. Give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. And then we'll definitely see each other again